So for those that don't know me, I'm Graeme McLean, so I head up the SharePoint and the Microsoft 365 practice for Bridgeall. You through this section. So what I want to do here is just kind of introduce the Power Platform in a bit more detail. Where does it fit in? What are some of the kind of key components to the Power Platform? And then I'll take you through some of the use cases. So I'll take you through some kind of Microsoft, like some kind of broad use cases. And then I'll talk to you about more specific kind of customer use cases. So, projects that we've carried out. And they're particularly more from the kind of the use case example. So we'll see a bit of the technology and a bit of the integration that can be done. But really, we'll be able to see, the process, what the process was at the start, and what we were able to transform the process into, and hopefully some of the benefits that we can get out of that and some of the savings that we can get out of that. I just want to point out again that obviously the chat's available on there. I've got one of my team, Sammy, is available on the chat. So if there's any questions as I go through this, it'd be ideal if you could kind of put them in chat in the first instance, and I'll kind of keep an eye on the chat, and at kind of appropriate points I'll try and pick out any questions as well if it's. So just moving on to kind of set the scene a little bit. So the Power Platform is Microsoft's kind of low-code platform offering. So you can think of it, instead of starting from scratch, writing code, you can think of it as a kind of mix of drag and drop technology and Excel type formulas, kind of pieced together with lots of different components. So it's made up of 4 kind of core elements, if you like, and they're along that top line there. So we've got Power BI, which some of you will be familiar with. So that's an application that can be used to just kind of surface data, within your organisation and outside your organisation, to help you just display rich reporting and analytics. And that can either be as part of an application, or that can be, kind of standalone as well. It helps to kind of let organisations get people within the organisation to self-serve themselves reports. So the idea is that you can surface the data, and whoever needs to consume that data can come in and, kind of help themselves to that data. So you're not having to prepare reports and get them sent out to people. Then the next one in, we've got Power Apps. So this is an application development environment that helps you produce applications in lots of different formats. So I'll go into that and what I mean about that in a wee bit more detail in the next slide. We've then got Power Automate. So this is a kind of powerful and scalable kind of automation type framework that can connect a variety of Microsoft and other third-party endpoints. So the idea being is that it can pick up data, or it can look for changes in things, and then it can start off a whole load of different actions all the way through to the end. So it's a very powerful workflow-based tool, and you'll see some examples of how we've used that for customers later on. And then at the very end there, we've got Power Virtual Agents. So really, chatbots without the code. So we're seeing that more and more, websites kind of interactive. You land on a website and somebody says, do you have a question? And then, you're able to interact with what you think is a person, but, more and more that's not a person. It's actually just a chatbot that's, been designed to kind of answer some of the common questions before handing off the more advanced tasks to a human. So the Power Virtual Agents, you can build these chatbots without the code. So you can kind of, use that kind of drag and drop, that kind of familiar interface with that goes across kind of Power Apps and Power Automate to build these Power Virtual Agents and to build these chatbots either within or outside of your organisation. So the bottom line there each of these elements along the top, they also make use of each of the kind of 4 components at the bottom. So you can think of this as a kind of pick and mix, if you like, where your actual solution that you build may contain kind of 1 or more of these things. So you've got the data connectors at the bottom there. So whether they are existing or whether they're custom created, there's the ability to kind of connect to and interact with data from a variety of different sources. So Microsoft offers about 300 odd data connectors out of the box that you can just connect to. So you can use Power Apps, or you can use Power Automate to go and connect to a SQL server, or connect to data in an Excel spreadsheet. And then output's the same as well. That could be output to a SQL server, it could be output to a SQL, an Excel spreadsheet as well. We then got portals. So the ability to kind of surface parts of your application or processes outside of the organisation. So this kind of facilitates a whole load of different scenarios around customers being able to update their own data that you hold on them, or suppliers being able to carry out kind of key parts of a business process. And we'll see how those portals can be branded up. There's a number of different kind of authentication scenarios there as well, where customers can come in, or suppliers can come in and kind of register to be part of this process and be part of this service, or they can be invited in, or they can be given a login to go and log into that as well. And this has some integration possibilities with Azure Active Directory as well. And then the third one across, we've got AI Builder. So the ability to really just, allow your applications or business processes to make use of some of the existing kind of Microsoft cognitive services. So I don't know if you've seen, Microsoft have got some kind of what they call cognitive services that sit in Azure, which do some kind of reasonably common tasks, but they're kind of infused a little bit with AI. So it's things like image recognition or text recognition, or forms processing. So what you do there for the image one, for example, is say we're looking for you wanted to identify like car registration numbers, for example. You would go to the service within Azure. You would give it some examples of photos with car registration numbers in. You would tell it where those registration numbers were. And then after you've kind of trained that model, you then just, every photo that you send to it after that, every graphic you send to it after that, it knows how and where to pick out a car registration number for that. So you can see, there's lots of different scenarios that would be useful for. And also in the form processing one, the idea of being able to, supply an invoice to the AI builder and get it to be able to split out the cost, the purchase order number, lots of different information out of there, and then make use of that in the wider business process as well. And then lastly, just on that slide there, the common data service. So this kind of powerful, scalable data repository that can hold the data for your applications and processes. And there will be a bit more information on that common data service later on, because it kind of underpins quite a lot of this, the scalability and the practicality of the framework. So together, all these bits make a really compelling offering that allows kind of business and IT to work together to tackle a variety of different use cases across all different parts of the organisation. And again, hopefully once we jump into some of the customer scenarios later on, we'll start to see, the various different aspects and the various different areas of the business that can be affected by this. Okay, so Power Apps can take many different forms. We've got a standalone kind of what they call a canvas app, which is really just the application with that kind of Power Apps is a kind of familiar look and feel, designed for desktop, tablet, or mobile, and really that can have multiple kind of data backends. So you could be using a SharePoint list there to build your application, or you could be using the common data services, as I mentioned before. We've also got model-driven apps, so they are similar to kind of dynamic CRM type style, so CRM style, where the solution is driven off of the entities that you've created in the background. So it quickly gets you to a kind of a consistent user interface, which is easy and quick to build because it's basically using those data entities to generate the kind of what we call the CRUD screens, the create and update screens. So in the examples that I'm showing there on the slide, this is just really where can kind of Power Apps surface. So where can we see Power Apps? Where can we use them? So the top left hand corner there, we've got a SharePoint web part. So we can kind of build on the existing SharePoint web part or a custom list interface and expose some of the Power Apps functionality within there. In the middle at the top, you can build a Power Apps application from an Excel sheet on OneDrive. So you've got an Excel spreadsheet and you want to actually build an application from there. One point I would make is that it's not recommended for running any kind of track and trace solutions. It's probably not a good idea to be running them with it. And then last at the top on the right hand side there is build Microsoft Teams tab. So being able to have a Microsoft team there and being able to kind of add a tab and have people within that team just really consume that solution from within that tab. So that's there just now, and also coming soon is the ability to kind of natively build these Power Apps solutions within Microsoft Teams. So build a kind of cut down version from within Microsoft Teams. On the bottom left hand side there is really using the templates that are available within Power Apps. So within the designer, there's already some kind of built-in templates that help you out. So for example, if you wanted to use build a solution around calendars, then there's already a kind of template there that'll give you a calendar view, so you're not starting from scratch. And similarly for emails as well, if you want to build a solution around emails, then there's solutions there to be able to do that as well. In the middle at the bottom there, we're talking about surfacing data and applications in Outlook. So if you've got a business scenario where it's very much email based and the users are kind of responding to emails, or they need to kind of get more contextual information around emails, then you can build that solution effectively as a sidebar within Outlook to kind of bring that context to them where they're working every day. And then lastly on the right is that people cards. So being able to kind of surface information about people. So we see that already through Outlook where we've got those kind of LinkedIn extensions. And again, you can extend that interface and bring out more context for the business scenario in that place as well. I guess the thing is, again, similar to the last slide, is in the reality of this, one application could surface as one or more of these things to different people, because the idea is that you're bringing the technology, you're bringing the context of the application to the people where they need it. So that may be that you've got one part of the process is very much, people are in email every day and they're using that and they want to see the context in email. And then other people are working within Teams and they want to see the application within Teams. So you can use that interface to surface the application both within Teams and within Outlook, so that each of the groups of users are not having to change how they work. They can kind of be productive and see the context of the data as well. So just want to go through the kind of the anatomy, if you like, of a Power App, and some of the other benefits of it. So any platform support. So Power App supports all the major platforms. So it supports the iOS, the Android, the Windows 10, across the desktop, the tablet, mobile, and gives native access to the device capabilities, which is really interesting. So things like the camera, the GPS location, pen and ink, So you can create applications where you've got people out in the field and they can go and they can get things signed, or they can take a photo, and then that will come right into the application. That can form part of your scenario. So that brings up a lot of power in itself to the application. And the other thing is as well that you don't really need to go through any of the kind of application stores. So you don't need to go through Google Play or through the iOS store. You're doing this by installing the Power Apps application. So you install one application on the mobile device, and then every Power App that you create really just kind of gets listed in there. And you can create shortcuts on the on the phone and the desktop and things like that for those applications as well. Sharing the app like a document. So what Microsoft have done is made it really, really easy to be able to share your applications with other people within your team or with the wider organization. So sharing is almost like SharePoint kind of sharing, just being able to kind of a few clicks, type in an email address, and then that's the person got permissions to the application. Where the application has like CDS as its backend, the Common Data Service, there may be a couple more things you want to do, because obviously you've got the ability to introduce more kind of role-based security around it and start to kind of build a more enterprise application. But if you're building a simple team-based application, it's really just really easy to kind of just share it with your colleagues. The seamless integration, so obviously built on top of Office 365, so you get that integration with Power Automate, Power BI, as I mentioned before. It's integrated with Teams, the wider Office 365, so the ability to kind of interact with SharePoint and some of the other functionality that offers, as well as the dynamic side, so the ability to kind of interact with your dynamic CRM, and take some of that information out of there and just surface that within Power Apps as well. The simple design experience, so I talked briefly about the designer, but effectively you've got this kind of drag and drop design experience. You can start from templates, so you can start from scratch. And the good thing about that is that the app is running with the data that you pull in as you build it. So you can quite easily and quickly see what's happening as you progress through the application. So you're not having to kind of guess what fields are going into there. As you're allocating the fields, you can quite quickly run through the application as you've got it, and see what's being populated in there and see the fields that you're working with, and and make sure that you're going okay as you go along. And then lastly, just the data connectivity that I've touched on before. So being able to kind of make use of all those connectors that Microsoft have produced there, and then the app logic. So just being able to put the formulas and things into the application and build into the application as well. And again, if you've used Excel, it's pretty similar to the kind of Excel formulas. And then layered on top of that, you've been able to make use of the AI that Microsoft provides, and then other Microsoft and kind of third-party services for more advanced logic if that's required. Okay, so just moving on to Power Automate then. So really this is the kind of the workflow part of the process that I talked about earlier, kind of introduced earlier on. You can see there the kind of designer aspect of it, where really you're able to connect with parts of Office 365 or connect with lots of external data sources, and then kind of transform. So think about it as that kind of ETL type process where you want to be able to extract data from somewhere, transform it in some way, and load it into something else. So it's really easy to use. It's really graphical, and it's just really easy and really flexible to kind of use. So lots of different good things about it. So, there's a number of different triggers to kind of kick off these processes. So you've got things like, I've added an item into my source solution. So that's the workflow knows then to kick off when the item has been added or if the item has been changed. It can be triggered on a kind of event-based or a schedule-based, so run every day or run when something happens. And also when a button's pressed, so you've got this idea that either mobile or desktop, you can kind of give people buttons to almost kick off that event. So if you want something to happen, somebody can go into their mobile and just actually click the button, and that'll kick off the process, kick off Power Automate process, which is quite smart. The other thing to mention in here is there's a built-in approval center. So what Microsoft have done is taken some of the common tasks around like document approval or approval of a process and built that into a kind of built-in approval center. So that means that if you've got any kind of, they're really easy to do because you can just push an approval out, and then that approval center can comes back, triggers the person who needs to approve. They get an email. Actually, in line in the email, they can go back and just approve, or they can go to the approval center and see all the approvals that they've got pending, and then they can just work their way through the approvals as well. So that's a really good kind of add-on feature that means that you're not having to regenerate some of this. And then just to cover the common data service. So this is just the last part, if you like, in this kind of introduction section. Then I'll take a wee look at the chat and see if there's anything that needs covered in terms of questions. So this really is the central data store for Power Platform. So if you're building any kind of larger solutions on the Power Platform, this is really where you want to be doing it. This is what you want to be as your kind of back end. So there's lots of different kind of advantages to doing that. It's built on top of Azure. It's scalable. It can be used as a data source across multiple different Power Apps. So if you build one solution and use the common data source, you can use that data source as your data source for additional Power Apps for different scenarios. So you can kind of expand on the data that's being stored in there and the data that's being used in there as well. It's got role-based security built on top of Azure Active Directory. You can enforce the business rules. So you can enforce your business rules within the data so that, no matter how many Power Apps you build on top of this, or how many scenarios you've got using the data, your business rules are enforced within the CVS. You've got things like duplicate detection in there as well, so you can automatically kind of flag and deal with any duplicates that appear. You've got good integration options with the kind of Azure Data Lake, other relational databases. So you could be bringing in data from Azure SQL, you could be sending data out to Azure SQL, sending data out to your Azure Data Lake for reporting scenarios as well. And then you've got event-driven integration as well. So when things happen either within CVS or outside of CVS, you can get it to make changes. And also the webhooks. So you can get it to when a row is added into CVS, for example, to trigger something else to happen. So an external solution to be able to pick up and carry out some of this information, carry out another part of this process. I should say at this point this is not the only storage mechanism that you can use for Power Apps. It's just for a proper kind of enterprise end-to-end solution. This is the best mechanism to use. You can use a SharePoint list. So if you want to build a simple Power App, we built solutions that just use SharePoint lists as the data repository, and that'll work for you for certain business scenarios. If you've already got an existing SQL or SQL Azure database, then you can make use of that as well. So you can use those existing SQL databases and build your UI and build your kind of Power App scenario on top of that as well. and other databases. So what that really kind of brings in is this idea of building a kind of a new UI, if you like, on top of a legacy system that's there, and we'll see some of that brought out in some of the use case scenarios as well. Okay, just going to take a few minutes to just scroll up the chat and see if there's any questions that I think Sammy's been kind of answering them as we go. Don't know, Ryan, is there you seen any questions coming through that haven't been answered there?
Yeah, there's around Power Automate dynamics and can Power Apps be driven by different events?
Yeah, so so it seems to, is that the one from Dave Watson here? So it seems to have an overlap with Dynamics workflow case functionality. So yeah, Power Apps can be driven. So the common data service is kind of built on top of like a lighter weight version of the entities that you get from Dynamics. So there's really good integration there between Dynamics and Power Platform and Power Apps. So if you want to drive something happening in Power Platform based off of events that happen in Dynamics, then that's definitely something that you can do, yeah, using the Power Automate part of the platform.
Okay. There's a couple of interesting questions from Douglas about integrating Power Apps in his strategy and some of the organisational challenges, and Peter's just asked a question there, how do we put in place normal engineering best practice? Really interesting questions. I would suggest that we maybe just delay picking those up until we get towards the end of the session, because I think we're going to cover that anyway.
Yeah, that's fine. So I've just seen Peter's question there. So yeah, Peter, that is going to come up later on. So we've got some slides and some chat later on about how to actually, kind of start to put some governance around this, because obviously it's one of these things that when you start talking about the Power Platform, you've got business users thinking, oh, this is great, think of all the scenarios that we can use, and then IT do that to a certain extent as well, but you've also got IT with their hat on saying, oh, how do we stop this from kind of proliferating everywhere across the organisation, not being able to control it, having to support it, all the different scenarios that people have as well. So we'll cover that later on, how you can set up some good governance and some good guardrails around that as well.
Rhodey's just flagged up a question from Diane there on licensing.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, licensing is an interesting one. So there is to answer the licensing question fully, probably need to take a wee bit of that offline and just see what your individual scenario is. There is some licensing considerations in terms of, if you want to use the portal, there's a kind of add-on license. If you want to use, some of the premium connectors, then there's some add-on licensing as well. And yeah, there's no getting away from it that there is a kind of add-on to this, so it can be expensive. I would say, quite interestingly, what we've seen is that that licensing change where they started to do the premium connectors and things like that happened October 2019, and what we saw around about the kind of tail end of last year was organisations saying, right, come and tell me how I can use Power Apps, but how I don't have to use any of the premium connectors. So how can I do this without using any add-on functionality? So we did a few kind of projects for that, and that seemed to be the kind of way that people were going for a certain amount of time. What we seem to have seen at the kind of turn of the year is people actually seeing the benefit that they can get from using these premium connectors, and the benefit that they can get from using the portals, where the cost of it from a licensing point of view kind of outweighs the return on investment that they get for either the customer being able to play part of that scenario, or being able to integrate with some of these kind of premium connectors. And I think people were just finding that actually they were skirting round about it. But actually, if they pay the license fee, they're getting the benefit out of it. I appreciate that's not going to be the case for everybody. But I think that's just, there is a licensing cost there, but you need to kind of have a look at that and decide for the business scenarios that I'm going to look at just now. It may be the case that the first couple of business scenarios, actually the cost of licensing seems quite heavy. But, once you've got it and you've maybe got kind of 5, 10 Power Apps, 15, 20, what's the kind of break even point? When do you start getting the benefit out of having that? So I think it's one that, I'm happy to take that. If you've got more info, if you want more information on that, Diane, I'm happy to kind of pick that up after the call. Okay, I'll just move on to some of the use cases then. And what I'm going to do at this stage is just outline some of the kind of high level use cases that are available to us. And then I'm going to just kind of dig in a wee bit more into some of the customer scenarios. So I know Douglas has just posted a message here saying interested to see some case studies on ROI. So there are some Microsoft case studies, but I'll kind of informally, if you like, cover some of the ROI just in terms of time saved when I come on to some of the customer scenarios that we're going to talk about. Okay, so this slide here just shows some of the kind of, the common broad use case scenarios where the Power Platform can be used, and you'll see some of these, some more of these scenarios once we kind of discuss the customer use cases in more detail. So the top left hand side there, I think we've already, there's a question about it earlier. So extending the functionality of existing M365 and Dynamics 365 out of the box experiences. So, you've already got Dynamics, for example, and you're using that in a CRM scenario. You can build a Power Apps Canvas app, and you can put that Canvas app kind of in line with Dynamics CRM. So if you've got information that you want to display to the user at that point that wouldn't normally be available based on the entities that they're currently using, that's something that you can do. So you can, put a Canvas app into that Dynamics 365 environment. You can also build, I touched on earlier, the kind of model-driven applications. So this idea of a kind of driven by the entities that you create. So very much in the kind of Dynamics 365 style. You create all the data fields, and then you create an application, and it gives you that kind of Dynamics 365 look and feel to be able to fill out all the fields and be able to go through the business process kind of scenario. On the right hand side there, we've got extending legacy applications. Where you've got legacy applications, they maybe have a really high cost for change. You can build a Power Apps or a Power Platform scenario to help you build a user interface to help you interact with, say, an ERP system, for example, or feed data into that ERP system, or get data out of that ERP system or out of that legacy system. So it may be that you want to, just surface part of the information for a particular, use case out of your legacy system. Or it may be that you're looking at, keeping the legacy system, but building a kind of brand new user interface with a kind of longer term strategy of, being able to then, replace some of the back end as you go along. So you could see how you could quite quickly build a Power Apps kind of user interface using the legacy data, and then start to replace the legacy data over time with a new database, be that common data service or something else. And then the bottom left hand side, so building mission critical end-to-end solutions. So, building these kind of solutions that go right across your organisation. Lots of different scenarios, so that may be mobile for some of the users, it may be desktop for some of the users, it may be within Dynamics for some of the sales users. You know, some self-service Power BI out the back of it, some virtual agents, and how just kind of integrate into the solution as well. And then the last one on the right hand side, so just building departmental solutions. So just solutions that will help a team or a specific department be more productive in their day-to-day work. So they may already be doing, you know, a business process. Maybe it's not really as streamlined as it could be, and they could be saving quite a lot of time if they streamline the process. So now they've got the ability to, you know, go and just have a think about the process, see how they could streamline it, and use the Power Platform to help them do that.